Hi everyone, I'm here today to talk about the first half of August and the total solar eclipse that we have coming up on the 12th. Now, a lot to say about this month because it is eclipse month, as you may know, and we have had some very big astrology in July that everybody has been talking about. And remember, that is just the ignition of another level of gestation for a higher level of consciousness. It's not a done deal in July and that's the end of it. It is just the very beginning, as David Clements talked about so eloquently in our recent conversation. I'll put the link for that below. Just another level of upshift, another gestation, powerful gestation, evolutionary period for this higher level of consciousness that we're birthing, we're going through at the moment in a series of steps. So very powerful. Now, I'm filming this on the 27th of July. From about the 28th, we are then in the energy of what's known as Lion's Gate. And many people talk about Lion's Gate on social media. It's exact on August the 8th. Kelly Kolodny, who I'm going to be speaking to this week, is doing a very big event on that, a 3-day live event, I believe. For Lion's Gate, and the importance of Lion's Gate really came from ancient Egypt, and because at this time it coincided with the heliacal rising of Sirius, which is our spiritual star, which my good friend Heather Ensworth has talked about a great deal and written about a great deal. And Sirius is really our spiritual star, our spiritual sun, our binary star, and that heliacal rising usually coincided with the rising of the Nile, which flooded the Nile Valley, and that brought fertility, prosperity, food growing to the area. So this was always seen as extremely positive, a new beginning, and the beginning of a new year, if you like, in ancient Egypt. So Sirius has continued like a lighthouse for us, and the white lions in Timbavati in South Africa are said to carry that frequency. They're very associated with Sirius. They carry that very high frequency energy for the evolution of humanity. And that's what Kelly is really focusing on in this big event. But it happens every year at August the 8th. But it seems to be getting stronger every year. Even going to be stronger next year because it's so close to the longest total solar eclipse we have this century, but more of that another day. So already as of the 26th of July, the true node moved into Aquarius and the south node moved into Leo. That's a nodal axis shift, and that will continue in those signs until March, I believe, March of 2028. So it's an 18.6 year cycle. So it hasn't been there since 2009. I think it was December 2007 to August 2009, if my memory serves me. So if you go back to that period in time, if you can remember, the North Node was then in Aquarius and the South Node in Leo. And they will be operational coming up now in the same opposing pair of houses as happened for you then. And I'll, rather than go over that material, I'll put the video below that I've done recently on that nodal shift, and you can take a look at that. But if you have your sun, your moon, or your ascendant in particular, sun, moon, ascendant, in either Leo or Aquarius, you are going to be going through some particularly big personal shifts over the next 18, 19 months, I would say. I mean, we're all going to be going through huge shifts because there's so much change coming up. But particularly if you have sun, moon, or ascendant in Leo or Aquarius, you're going to be feeling this very personally. Also, I'd say your own nodal axis as well. If you have your nodal axis, whichever way it is, whether it's North Node in Aquarius or North Node in Leo, you're going to be going through a very important nodal shift as well. And another aspect of this, which I don't think I emphasized enough in that nodal axis video, is this can really burst the bubble of any I did talk about grandiosity and narcissism in leadership, but even at the personal level, this can burst the bubble of self-aggrandizement, ego inflation, that kind of thing. Now, whether that's going to catch you out or catch someone in your personal circle out that, you're finding that within your friendship group, there's somebody who's a bit overblown, and this is a bursting the bubble kind of nodal shift, because with the South Node in Leo, the South Node is essentially what we're moving away from the shadow side of that. So if somebody's put themselves on a big stage, if you like, or is loving some kind of celebrity status, the bubble is likely to be burst if it is not in integrity and authenticity. Because a big theme of this nodal shift, North Node in Aquarius, is shifting to truth and authenticity and integrity in a bigger way. Living your truth, no false facade, no false persona. All of those are going to come off, which is why I think that leaders, celebrities, lots of people in the public eye may be caught by this. And actually, quite soon, we're going to be reading each other's energy anyway. So we're going to be very easily able to see this in each other. Something will feel off. It's not ringing true. Another theme for this nodal axis shift is that it will really emphasize things like humanitarianism, egalitarianism, civil rights, human rights, in perhaps a bigger way than we have known in quite a long time, because part of the astrology, as you will know, because I've talked about it in many videos, is the seed point for the Uranus-Pluto trine that we have now. And the Uranus-Pluto trine was exact at 4 degrees of their signs in July. It will repeat at the exact degree 5 times until early 2028. But the seed point for that was 1965, 1966. And the 60s, even if you didn't live through it, you will know that was a huge time of revolution, of protests around civil rights, human rights, gay rights, women's rights, right, black power, right across the board. It was a greater demand for equality in society. Everybody's rights being respected. And now, not only with Pluto in Aquarius trine to Uranus, the blossoming of that seed point, but also the fact the nodal axis is, the North Node is in Aquarius, will emphasize those themes as well. So I can see a lot of social unrest coming up at this time through these next few months. So we're going to be calling out false power, false facades, elitism, aggrandizement, narcissism. And we will be demanding a new form of leadership that is much more heart-centered, much more truly concerned for the people, service to others, wants to do what's right for the good of the people, not just service to self, the good of self. And so this is also the beginning of a birth of a new socio-economic and political structure. Now, it's going to take time. It's just the very, very beginning. But part of that unique configuration we had in July is the very beginning of the birth of a new society, a new economy, a new form of leadership for sure, a new political structure that is much more horizontal, less vertical. So, it's not going to happen in a day, a week, a month, or even a year, but it's the very beginning of it, because the seed points are here for that in this shift of the power to the people. So recognize these are big long-term themes. They're not flash in the pan all over in July. Now we're into eclipse month and it's something else. These are just ignition points that are very exciting and I think incredibly positive. Not to say this will be perfectly smooth and comfortable all the way through. I think in the later months of this year, we're going to see a real accelerated collapse in many of the long-term structures we've known in our lives, be they political, financial, could be medical, educational. I think we're going to see an accelerated collapse. And that could be quite disruptive and disorienting and uncomfortable. Yes, absolutely. I don't think we can make an omelette without breaking eggs. I think we will certainly see that. But be prepared for that psychologically, and just know that our task is just to hold the light. Hold that note, as an opera singer does. Hold the vision of a more loving world, where we can see joy, love, compassion, gratitude. Just hold that frequency, because that's the frequency around which reality congeals, if you like, or collapses into matter. But it begins with our consciousness. It begins with our frequency. So all of this whole longer period we're going through is about the evolution of consciousness. And, when people say, well, show me, where is New Earth? Well, it's actually much more of an inner process, because it's actually a shift from an external focus to an inner focus. So it's just dropping into bliss, finding peace, finding love in your heart, finding that sense of complete stillness and 0 point. That's New Earth. That's the frequency. And then gradually, when enough of us are doing that, there's a real momentum happening now, we can start to see how it manifests in the world in terms of more loving communities, supporting each other, etc. So that's the longer term thing. So I want to get away from this kind of instant flash in the pan view of some of the transits that I share and other astrologers share. So we have a lot of fire energy. It is undeniable. We have Saturn and Neptune in Aries long term. We have the Sun moving into Leo. We have Mercury moving into Leo on the 10th of August. We have Jupiter in Leo all for a year until July next year. And I noticed when Jupiter moved into Leo, which he did on the 30th of June, very sadly, there was a real expansion in wildfires. We have a heavy air fire combination with the outer planets, including Jupiter now, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, all in air and fire signs. And what air does is the winds can act like bellows for the fire, which it's doing in many places. I know it's done that very strongly in Spain, where there have been some, I think over 300,000 people have had to be evacuated around Madrid. So these wildfires, I know for sure, are in US, in Canada, in southwest France, in Spain, in Sicily, and I'm sure many other countries that I'm not aware of. But that must be very scary. So anything we can do with our meditations, I have that free 15-minute 7 p.m. UK time meditation. Just look at the meditation page on my website for that. In the guided free meditations there, I'm always speaking about calming down any extremes, making sure the people and the animals are safe, because that's something we can all do for free, but it's fiery. It's very fiery energy. And Mars on the 11th and 12th of August moves onto a world point, 0 of Cancer, a world point. So even though that's a water sign, remember that Mars is primal fire as an archetype. And Mars is out of bounds beyond the normal 23 degrees north or south of the ecliptic from the 3rd to the 28th of August. So essentially the whole month. Now, when a planet is out of bounds, as I've mentioned before, it tends to operate in a more extreme way. So, if an athlete was born with Mars out of bounds. It could be amazing because they could be exceeding all normal records, going beyond what has been established before. But there's a sense of the extreme here. So again, we're going to have to work, hard in our meditations and on our day-to-day feeling, thinking, moving through our days to stay calm. Try not to get agitated, try not to get angry, because those emotions are just feeding the field. Also, we know that we have one of the strongest El Nino weather systems in many years, and that's associated with warming temperatures, particularly around the Pacific, and even the Atlantic's going to be warmer this year. So we have, heat everywhere. So just try and, if many of us calm down ourselves, that will have an effect on the collective field. It's the best, easiest, free thing we can all do. Also, with that unique configuration, the basket that many people have spoken about in July, as the personal planets move more quickly, they will activate that basket configuration, which will really, apart from Jupiter, which is moving on quickly, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto stay there for the next 2 to 3 years. It's a long-term thing, activated by the personal planets. So I think the other thing to say here, before we leave the nodes as well, and it harkens back to what I was just saying about leadership, and Leo is the sign, the regal sign of kingship. It's somebody has spoken, and unfortunately I can't credit them because I can't remember who it was, but are we going to see the end of kings, the fall of kings, or king-like beings who assume, put themselves in a position of being king? And I just happened to be looking at King Charles's chart, King Charles III in the UK, and I can speak about this because he's in the public domain. So an astrologist can calculate his chart. So he was born 14th of November 1948 at 9:14 p.m., 9:14 p.m., 21:14 London. And so transiting Pluto, he has an ascendant at 5 of Leo. So transiting Pluto is currently opposing his ascendant and also squaring his nodal axis. Big point of crossroads. His sun, SUN, is at 22 of Scorpio, and it is his chart ruler because he has a Leo ascendant, chart of a king. And our total solar eclipse we're going to be looking at in a moment is at 20 degrees 02 of Leo. So that is going to be squaring his sun. So again, a big kind of crossroads reassessment period. The eclipse is conjunct Pluto in his first house of identity, powerful identity. And also transiting Uranus is square his natal Saturn, which rules his 6th house of health. So we know he's been having treatment for cancer, so there could be more kind of issues around health, ups and downs and changes, and we will wait and see. But his chart is certainly being very activated at this time. So let us start to look at the chart for this. And this is, just before I share this, this is a south node eclipse. Now, whenever we have an eclipse, it has to be closest to the north node end of the nodal axis or the south node, one or the other, in order for the eclipse to happen. And this is closest to the south node because it's in Leo. And when that happens, particularly in Leo, this is about identities we have to let go. Identities, facades, old stories. We have to let that go. That's a very big theme for the next 18, 19 months. And it comes up very strongly at this eclipse. It'll come up very strongly next year at the big solar eclipse, total solar eclipse as well. And the eclipse path on the 12th of August falls across Iceland, Greenland, part of Russia, Spain. Spain comes up a lot in several eclipses, actually, during the 19 month period. A small corner of Portugal, the UK. And whenever a country falls under the eclipse path, often those countries or some of those countries either come into the news in the next few months or there's significant changes in those countries as well. So the fact that we have the nodal axis at the anaretic degrees, so the south node is at the anaretic degree. In fact, let's look at it now. Share this. This is for the total lunar eclipse. This is happening 1738 universal time, which on the clock is 1838 UK time. Ignore the houses, ignore the clock face. We're just going to look at where the planets fall and their aspects to each other. So we can see that here, actually, I've still got the mean node here, but the true node actually just dipped into Leo Aquarius on the 26th of July. And there's a slight difference between them. The true node is the actual movement of the nodal axis, and the mean node kind of means an average, if you like. The true node moved in on the 26th, and the mean node, which we've got here, will follow in kind of mid-August time, but there's not a lot of difference between them. But as the true node is actually now at 29 of Leo, that's the anaretic degree, again, of a fire sign. And we also have Mercury, Jupiter, expanding the fire, Sun, Moon, obviously, all in fire. So this is like a big new moon. So see where this is falling in your chart, which house area, because it's a big new beginning. And if that solar eclipse within, I'd say, about 4 degrees of any planet, stick to the conjunctions here, any planet in Leo for you, that tends to bring you into greater prominence, bring up sudden opportunities. Eclipses can act like wild cards, particularly total solar eclipses, and they can jump us back on our path of destiny. Eclipses are very destined and fated. One of the few aspects of astrology, I think, that are. And so, again, go back to end 2007 into 2009 and what was happening there for you, which house area is this happening in. If this solar eclipse is happening on your ascendant or your midheaven, again, can be very positive in terms of prominence and publicity. You can be jumped into the limelight. So the message here is about a true heart connection, a true heart connection that we are starting to birth. And Dr. David Clements talked about this a great deal. Many other people are talking about this need to live through the heart rather than the mind. We've been so programmed to live through the mind in the information age and TikTok and Twitter and X. And, we've got to shift from that our principal navigational tool in life becomes our heart. And Leo is all about heart energy. So this is about our confidence, our positivity, our joy, big thinking for the future, Jupiter, Mercury. Think of the heart's toroidal field, which is way bigger than that of the brain, and how positive that is. But remember, as I've been saying, Mars, primal fire, is out of bounds for the whole month, essentially, and it's also here on a world point. 0 of the cardinals is a world point. So here we could see, because it's in Cancer, very heated emotion and a particularly strong need for emotional security. That's Cancer, very strong need for emotional security. And this is actually forming a cardinal grand cross here, because we have Mars square to Venus at 5 of Libra, which is square to Ixion at 6 of Capricorn, which is square to Neptune at 4 of Aries, and back again to Mars. So this is a cardinal grand cross. Now, those are quite initiatory. They're quite galvanizing in terms of, it's quite action oriented. So let's take this piece by piece. Now, Neptune square to Mars can, in a less positive expression, mean that we kind of lose our energy, we lose our focus, our sense of drive, and anything which might have seemed like a long-term goal, possibly because Saturn is retrograde as well, going back the long-term plans. This may act as overall a reality check on our long-term goals. Do we need to adjust? Do we need to tack? Are we still moving in the right direction for those long-term goals? However, at a more positive level, this is beautiful in terms of spiritual action. Whether spiritual action is yoga, tai chi, qigong, whether it's working down at the food bank, looking after homeless people, going on a sleep out to raise funds for homeless people, that is spiritual action. So beautifully expresses that. And, Jupiter here in trine to Neptune is about that bigger spiritual vision that is charitable and philanthropic, a more perfect reality that we want to live to, we want to move to. Then we have Mars square to Venus, and Venus brings in again this principle of what is fair for all. Libra loves to keep the balance, keep the harmony, what is fair, what is right, what is just. And that's really reinforced by the solar eclipse being trine to Eris. Remember, Eris is the warrior sister of Mars, all about fighting for injustice, those who are excluded, who are on the periphery, who are not heard. And so Venus in Libra is reinforcing that sense of inclusion and harmony. Everybody is part of the picture. Venus opposing Neptune here is about a higher love, a divine love, a kind of Christ consciousness love, beauty, ethereal beauty, aesthetic beauty. It's very fine. And then we have this square of the cardinal grand cross to Ixion. Now, this is a very powerful position for Ixion, who I happen to love, as you know, because it isn't just that it's part of this cardinal grand cross. It's also, it's a very complex chart, I know, that the solar eclipse is in a sesquiquadrate, 135-degree aspect to Ixion. So it is fueling, this solar eclipse is fueling Ixion, and Ixion is also in this finger of fate, finger of God, Yod, between Mercury and Uranus as well. So this is a reorientation to live through the heart. Mercury, which has been our mental principle, now shifting into Leo, living from the heart and being expanded there by Jupiter. Ixion is a very revolutionary energy. As you know, when Prince Harry was born, natally he has Ixion on his midheaven, which speaks volumes. And this is about, are the rules we are playing by the correct ones? Are the rules we are playing by the correct ones? And it challenges any system where there is a lack of integrity and authenticity. It challenges that system. And it's very courageous in doing so. And it's in Capricorn, in a sign of the patriarch. It is in quincunx here as part of this finger of God, finger of fate to Uranus, the planet of revolution, challenge. So, this is, I think this is very clear in terms of many of us are going to question the system and, like Ixion, feel that we need to move beyond the mainstream values Venus in Libra, values, reassess the values, and find our own path of joy and bliss. Really important. Pluto is in a quindecile, this black line, little Q here to the solar eclipse. Quindeciles are where we have a sense of obsession or urgency or upset, and this is around issues of power. Where does the power lie? Because Pluto in Aquarius, as we know, can be invisible government. It can be controlled by technology, which I've spoken about many times. It can also be the power to the people. And what is extraordinary today, 12th of August, Pluto moves out of bounds to the south. Now, I've talked many times about this, that incredible 20-year piece of research from US astrologer Rosie Finn. I'll put the link for our conversation again below that. We spoke, I think, a year or so back, that she looked back, I think it was about 4,000 years in her research, took her 20 years, and she found that whenever Pluto moved out of bounds to the south, that was a much greater period of revolution on the part of the people to challenge the leadership. And Pluto started to go out of bounds to the south in August 25. It will continue to do that broadly, kind of August to December every year until 2035. But it moves out of bounds to the south. Extremes, yes, the day of the eclipse. I think that's quite incredible. Okay, so I do see at one level, as truth comes to light, a lot of social unrest. However, I see really just a whole shift of consciousness here. I mean, many beautiful things are happening. Where does the power lie? What are your choices? Uranus in Gemini. The solar eclipse is so heavily aspected here. It is quintile, which is a 72-degree aspect. Homer, the dwarf planet, to do with regeneration, a deep shamanic contact with the earth and nature. Homer, as I've spoken about in another video, is directly opposite to Chiron in Taurus. This is really bringing about a much greater awareness of Gaia, her consciousness, what we've done to nature, the exploitation, and really recognizing we've got to step back into guardianship and stewardship of the earth. A quintile is a very creative aspect as well. So we're bringing that heart energy back into this sense of regeneration for the earth, bringing the soil back to life, bringing the seas back to life. So also here we have Pluto quintile to Salacia and Saturn. So this really is talking about a creative use of our power coming from the embodiment of more light, the embodiment of more light. And every day I say to my higher self, my angels, show me how I can embody more light. Show me how I can embody more light. It's all about the light. I believe also in here there is a grand trine in air. Yes, there is, between Venus in Libra, Pluto in Aquarius, and Uranus in Gemini. So air is to do with our sociability, making new choices. Uranus in Gemini, new choices around community, new friendships, relationships, old friendships falling away if they're felt to be hollow or not on the same frequency. And new ones are developing, and these people are going to feel like your frequency tribe. Their integrity, their authenticity is ringing true for you. They have the same values. Venus in Libra. So yeah, this is all about really the birth of a new consciousness that's very powerful. Now, later this month, I think that's all I have to say think that's all I have to say about this chart. It's quite enough. There's so much in there. And I will put below all the videos I feel are relevant to this chart as well, so I won't repeat. So later in the month, we have, I believe it's the last eclipse, a lunar eclipse in Pisces. And then we move more fully into these eclipses in Leo and Aquarius for the next 18, 19 months. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to have our longest total solar eclipse of the century on the 2nd of August in 2027. And that is falling, one of the main areas for the eclipse path is over Egypt and the Giza Plateau, which is fascinating. So, and I'm going to be talking to Kelly Clodney this week about that too. So what do we do with all of this? What do we do? Because that astrology was quite complicated. And, you can almost put the astrology to one side. Whatever the astrology says, it's actually very simple. Turn inwards. Drop into bliss as often as you can. The more we can hold that frequency, like an opera singer holds a note of love, joy, bliss, that frequency, the more we are strengthening that architecture of light. So it becomes, it's almost like putting up a scaffolding of light on which we can start to put bricks and mortar. We have to make it strong enough in consistency in holding that note, holding the light, that we can truly start to build the bricks and mortar around it. And the more you can do this, and I'm probably one of the absolute worst in terms of how we've operated in our lives so far. We've been taught that you've got to set goals, you've got to achieve, you've got to have a business plan with steps of how to get to your goals, you've got to take action. It's very yang. It's very yang energy. And we're shifting all of that into receptivity so that one of the most valuable things we can do is just sit in bliss. And we can sit in bliss because we're in meditation. We can sit in bliss because we're doing some, the yogic baby belly breath, which is on the meditation page of my website. I'll put the link for that below. Whether we're gazing into a candle, whether we're doing some yoga or some beautiful chanting that gets us into that state, we're dropping into that bliss where we feel a sense of almost physical dissolution, that we are at the 0 point. There's nowhere to go, there's nothing to think about, the mind is empty. And we feel almost that we're just, and Dr. David Clements described beautifully the other day in our conversation, how we just feel, he does a lot of diving. I haven't done any diving, but I've done snorkeling. And he said when he's on his really deep dives, there's a feeling of just, blending with the ocean, being part of the ocean. It's that. And even if you haven't done any diving, it's that feeling of bliss and dissolution. And that's, spending time doing that is one of the most valuable things we can do. And even just doing, and there are many meditations you can do, of course, but even just joining the simple free 15-minute one that I suggested, 7 p.m. UK time every evening, that is taking on its own momentum, because people who've been doing it for quite some time now, a couple of years, are reporting that the light is getting, it's like this webbing of light all around the earth, which is getting stronger and brighter and bigger every single time they do it. And this is becoming, as I say, the energetic architecture for New Earth. And the more we can do that, that's one of the best uses of our time right now, rather than the push and the goals and the next steps and all of that. And anybody can join and do, it doesn't matter what age, what nationality, what religion, none of it matters. All you need is a pure, open, loving heart. everyone is welcome, a pure, open, loving heart. And I'm also aware that when we do this, and I become more aware recently of that energy that we're generating every day, every evening in our meditation is taking on a consciousness of its own. And this is what happens. And I came across a wonderful term a few days ago, and I've been meaning to share this with you because it's called, I hadn't heard of it until a few days ago, and it's called an egregore, which sounds like it should be a kind of friend of Winnie the Pooh, doesn't it? It's just I think it's a beautiful word, egregore. An egregore is essentially neutral, but it's a kind of collective energy form. And it's when a lot of people come together and focus and instill this group energy form with particular meaning. So, for instance, in the 1960s, the Beatles were an egregore, the Rolling Stones were an egregore, a political party is an egregore, a cult is definitely an egregore. Our daily evening meditations are an egregore because it becomes a consciousness which takes on its own momentum and starts to create itself from the energy that's been created from the meditators, if that makes sense. And of course, this is a very loving energy that we're creating. And it can join together with other groups of meditators. It isn't just us doing this. And so I just wanted to share that with you because it's a really, fascinating concept that I got just terribly interested in, that I wanted to share with you. So drop into bliss, stare into a rose, deep, deep into a rose, stare into a sunflower, stare into a candle flame, hug a tree, any of those things to develop that sense of surrender, not in a giving up sense, but in a sense of kind of dissolving the push, dissolving the efforting, and just becoming part of that deep ocean that Dr. David Clement spoke about so eloquently. A lot there today. Hope it's helped you. And back very soon with some different videos this week again. God bless. Thank you for listening. Bye for now.